Good morning to Delft, to Copenhagen, and of course to Darmstadt also. Hello, Gilbert, Pierre, hello, Anna, hello, Uli. Thanks a lot for inviting me to this workshop and all the inspiring moments and change during the preparation of this workshop and the insight I was lucky to gain into your work. Looking for a new design culture in this debate where we suddenly recognize that it's 5 to 12, nearly too late. That was the title of the little contribution, the amuse-gueule I gave in April, discussing the idea, the attitude of the next generation, the aesthetical approach in circular design and in particular in wood architecture. Recognizing that in the discourse, in the debate on climate change, probably we suddenly rediscover the old building material wood as one of the building material of the future, since in contrast to the other building materials as concrete or steel, wood is the most efficient method to avoid emissions. So, and on the other side, we recognize that wood allows us also to renew the building process by using modern methods and digital tools in the prefabrications. For that, what used to take place at the joinery place, the splitting, the sawing, and cutting to length. And thinking about the next generation of wood architecture, rethinking construction, we also need to think about the culture, about the new culture of design, the culture strengthened by the beauty, the poetry of wood that wants to be touched, smells, breathes, and tells us a story of growth and the patina that of use. One of the 3 thoughts I tried to share in April, I titled Coherence, the coherence, the unity of content and form as potential in a new design culture, since wood demands and enables a strong grammar, a serious connection, a relationship between the layers, between the supporting structure and its wrapping, between the construction and the interior, so that the interior is not declining into a moody, fashionable staffage. And I illustrated this by this marble statue with this coat as a wrapping. The drape reveals the physiognomy of the wearer, while the physiognomy still is credible, readable. The second thought I discussed was the role of the detail in architecture in a whole which is made up of parts that are at the same time a whole. The detail which gives us orientation, scale, and hierarchy enables a close-up view, not only a view from distance. The detail is not irrelevant since its parts determine the whole. And I try to illustrate this with a shirt, where the collar is part of the whole of a shirt, thereby its detail is specifying the expression of the appearance and thus also the appropriateness and the social context. Transfer to architecture, both links, right and left, may transfer the forces, but while in the traditional connection on the left hand, the logic, the forces remain readable, remain centrally tangible, and from the flow, the shape emerges may the nail plate on the right hand solve the problem, but this negotiation, the geometry of the structure, it solves it only rationally, but negates the tectonic logic and thus shape. The potential in wood architecture is to use the joinery, which enables a close-up view to enrich the architecture. And the third thought I gave in April was I titled with the virtue of simplicity, demanding a certain timelessness, a beauty achieved in itself, in particular in the diversity of our age. I'm convinced that simplicity and modesty are still elementary and reliable goals. The desperate search for an originality, for a gimmick, for a new architectural language, self-centered, exhausted in formal freedom, seems to me to be the wrong way when we realize that in times that are determined by change, we have to build adaptable structures with long lifespans, which can be used differently. In this sense, the question is not how something can be constructed in wood, but based on the material, starting with the material and its logic, grammar, and poetry, how can it appear being made out of wood? In a search for new design culture in timber architecture, one of the potential is to use the structure in a formative way, and that's why I titled my lecture today, Structure and Expression, trying to give you also some insights into the work of the studio I'm running here in Darmstadt with my wife. While in the fluid concrete, the structural logic, the flow of forces, the vertical and horizontal load transfer, and the stiffening is denied or remains invisible in the linear elements of wood constructions. The flow of forces remain visible and allow the joinery to determine the detail. The distinction between load-bearing and non-load-bearing components, between structure and infill, opens up the potential to develop a coherent image from the interplay of specialists and the structure, which dictate perhaps rhythm, or which gives rhythm and scale, with a material which has some restriction, but out of the restriction can also form a certain grammar. So by rethinking wood architecture, one potential is to rediscover the structure as a formative element in the interior, like here in the anatomy inside the vein, or inside the rabbit. So the skeleton, the anatomy as a formative element of the interior, but also as a supporting and determining structure of the envelope. So, or of the skin of the whale or of the rabbit. In the Academy for International Cooperation in Bonn, the first project I wanted to show to you this morning, here federal employees are prepared for their work in emerging countries with language courses and the teaching of regional culture. And there was a competition, and in the competition they gave the didactic concept based on a learning landscape for self-controlled learning processes, and as well as separated seminar rooms, especially for the learning of language skills, and a media library. So a learning concept that follows up the discussion we are currently taking up in school buildings with the questions, how can we learn tomorrow? Recognizing that the frontal teaching does not correspond to the different learning speeds of kids or students, especially in increasingly heterogeneous societies. And that in a world where you can get any information everywhere, every time, we have to recognize that we need to teach more skills than to teach knowledges. So we were looking for an architectural language for this learning landscape, which expresses the restlessness of learning, the searching, the reflecting, the curiosity, and the looking in all directions. And but beside that, we thought it's important to do this a little bit disciplined and with a systematic order. The site where we had to deal with was in BONN, in Bonn-Röttgen, so on the edge of this wonderful so-called cotton forest. The site offers ideal conditions for this learning landscape: calmness, concentration on the one side, but also openness. Adjacent to an existing seminar building, which was used to be the so-called Andreas Hermes Academy, with this characterful roof drawn far down, which had been renovated and converted into seminar rooms and residential building parallel to our project. So right next to this building, we developed a freestanding multi-tiered structure, which was or is intended to express this diversity of learning in a lively manner. The floor plan here, the upper floor, is designed like a net, a modular learning landscape, an open communication zone, like two rings, two rings, and two rings around, every time around a little courtyard. And in these two rings, this is a learning landscape for the learning alone or in small group, with insights to the seminar rooms, which are at the edge, and different sizes of language rooms, and outlook in all directions into this wonderful landscape. For that, the areas can be used as an open learning zone without any corridors and fire protection regulations. The building is divided into 5 units with about 400 square meters. We were looking for a friendly, light, diverse atmosphere, which is needed for relaxed learning and teaching. To illuminate the deep room zones, the roofs on the upper floor are unfolded, pyramid-like, and the anatomy, the skeleton, the structure is built out of a basic 2-story element. Here you see these 2 stories, the first floor and the ground floor, with the ceiling which is supported by these beams, by the surrounding rooms, with the ceiling which is in a statically, just like a hollow box with a statically effective top and bottom cladding to reduce the construction height, so that it's a very stiff and very stable box. You see it here in the section, the top and bottom cladding and the beams inside. So and the bottom cladding is perforated so that the ceiling is load bearing, but it's also an acoustic element at the same time. So combined, integrated, instead of different layers or additions as we do it in solid construction. Analog, the pyramid shaped unfolded roof construction, also with this top and the bottom cladding and supported at the highest point by this very small thin steel tube. And these ceilings are arranged like a chessboard in alternating directions, so that the beams they are of the grid are always fully utilized. The cross-shaped pillars enable easy connections of all elements, and they enable to integrate diverse media, especially rainwater. Therefore, one of the parts, one of these elements is removable. Looking onto the section on the detail, you see on top of these ceiling elements some concrete slabs normally used on walkways, and they are placed on the ceiling elements to ensure noise insulation between the ground and the upper floors. And within the raised floor, within this area, the installations are managed, and on top we have a conventional floor construction used for heating and cooling. And in this raised floor we have the supply of air, which are every part of these grids can be reached. So we try to reduce the amount of air, and so it's always only if the room is really used, the air is transported to. The sustainability of the building is proven by the so-called EGNB certificate in gold, which includes an energy concept with a geothermal field as a seasonal pendulum storage, operating in winter as heat source and in summer as a cold source. Hermann Blumer pointed already out the necessity of building and the potential of building a mock-up. So before the start of the construction, the commissioned carpentry previously built one module to test the construction, but to test also the mounting concept and to check surface qualities, as well as to optimize the joints. The ceiling elements are individually CNC perforated according to our plans. This used to be unaffordable some years ago, but with the technical improvement, it's nearly for free. And the mineral ruling is laid in these elements from acoustic absorption. In timber construction, in developing the structure, transport and assembly must be considered at an early stage in the planning process, and in particular also the weather protection of the wooden components. And for weather reason, the mounting is not horizontal like we do it in concrete structure, but vertical, as you can see here in this little story, where you can see how the building process was managed, first putting up the pillars, then the beams, then the first ceiling elements and the roofs, and then going on. So the mounting of the elements, here you see the mounting of the first ceiling is like a Lego-like process, and the roof elements previously sealed on the ground floor and just put onto the structure. Because of the high precision, all interior elements had been prefabricated and installed step by step. And by finishing the structure, the skeleton, the anatomy, the physiognomy can be felt everywhere. The connection between the supporting structure and its envelope, the wrapping, the skin of the rail between the shell and the interior can be felt, so that the skin is not the result of a moody composition or a fashionable staffage. The tent-like roof allows to lighten the deep room zones and opens up a view into the sky to somehow to inspire also the ideas of the participants, the visitors and the bride, but also sheltering atmosphere corresponds to the self-image of an open house, the need for communication, but also for contemplation. With a low height and a pavilion character, the building nestles well in between the existing buildings, the housing neighborhood, and the landscape. Interlocks with the landscape and appears small and in scale due to the stepped and folded facade. Consistently, everything follows the structure, the logic of the concept without anything being added and without anything which may be removed. So content and idea, form, structure and design are one. We tried to transform this idea about how to learn in an increasingly heterogeneous society, the search for rooms which allow differentiated learning into a much bigger scale for a school center in Regensburg. In fact, a project for 2 schools, a primary and a secondary school, and a big gym. And it's a very difficult site because the site is sloping, which is hardly to see on this model. The site is sloping about 8 meters, so it's 2 stories, and the volumes we developed, they are arranged like a necklace, opening to a series of outdoor spaces and grouped always around these courtyards, forming these courtyards, which is also the playground for the pupils. And with wonderful views from the courtyard and classrooms onto the historic city of Regensburg. And the supporting structure determines the appearance to the outside with a dense grid. And this dense grid allows a varied and changing uses in the inside. And inside, we offered pedagogical usable zone around these courtyards, these interior courts here. In fact, these are courts, and this is an atrium in the middle, and giving space for project-related and group-oriented learning outside the classroom. But instead of the grid in Bonn, the load-bearing structure gives rhythm and scale in the inside. Here you see the load-bearing structure, but also in the outside, where the structure is put on the outside. It's gives a certain plasticity, which is technically useful to avoid overheating. And so this is the pillar. This piece is the pillar, pretty tiny because it's put every meter, and which is cladded outside for weather protection. And this is also the cladding. So this piece is only the structure. And you see the beams inside here. So this scheme is rather strict, but it's kind of a frame or a passepartout to be possessed by the liveliness of the kids. And we are also working on these questions of learning environment in Gießen, where we just recently won a competition for that, what we call a Berufsschule, so a school where young adults are trained for in between their or beside their apprenticeship. So in the Protestant Community Center situated in Wiesloch, south of Heidelberg, the structure of this slightly diagonal wooden beams characterize the interior and unfold the spatial atmosphere and poesy of the common space. The common space here in the ground plan, the common space which had been asked for in the competition. It's set like the central heart, the central organization element, with a courtyard just beneath here, which is around an existing tree. So at the beginning of the competition, they said you can do everything, but this tree has to remain. So we planned a courtyard around this tree. This heart, it's detached from the ring like a cloister. So all the other rooms are arranged around this central room, with the administration rooms on the left and the group rooms on the right, and storage room on the back, and the entrance and entrance hall here down, with which opens to the street with a large window. In the heterogeneous context, this ring-shaped figure mediates to the in this urban figure between the various scales and heights of the neighbors. Like a wooden instrument, this central room is detached from the heavy base made out of this brick, this exposed masonry, and with a concrete ceiling. The logic of the wooden structure, the detail is not an ornament, but is developed from the doing, tells the story of the making, junction. It's not attached, not arbitrary, but entering. And when you enter the room, you smell the white soaked wood. You hear the absorption of the wooden wall and ceiling panels, and somehow you want to touch the surfaces, which are so rich in its texture. And in the outside view, the height of this central room manifests that the community, the getting together, is central to this center. And the foyer opens up with like a big shop window to the street, to the public, to welcome and to invite everybody to take part and to be part of the community. At the innovation fabric, we are right now planning in Heilbronn, an office building for young startups. The logic of the wooden construction with this truss-like timber structure, this formative element determines the character already from far away, but also in the inside, where the inventors, the founders, the co-workers and creatives come together and inspire one another around this central hall. As it's like a think tank and lounges for working and exchanging ideas with one another. That's the idea of this central hall. And in the urban setting, the innovation fabric forms the beginning of this new park. It's so-called Neckar-Ufer Park. It's a conversion of an industrial zone, and it's the urban idea is strange because we took over this new line but it's slightly turned by this simple square figure. It's slightly turned, and there's an opening to form the entry. The all-round transparent appearance of the square structure without any front or back corresponds to the mission statement of the innovation factory. The hall in the interior, good to see, is the focal point, enabling easy orientation, promoting exchange among each, and giving different perspective insides and outsides between the offices, which are arranged outside in this ring, and which are fully glassed into the interior. The truss-like pillars outside, the facade and the wide span of the beams here allow highly flexible and adaptable plans. And due to the building height and the open space with this interior hall, we had to, or we will have to, install a sprinkler system for fire protection, shown here in blue, the blue lines, which is quite unusual in office building in Germany. I don't know how the tradition Denmark and Netherlands is, but here it's quite uncommon, although it's a pretty simple technology, and it allows us to also to build higher with wood construction. But still, we have to build the fire staircase in concrete. So, like the school in Regensburg, the ceiling elements are constructed out of these beams, and these beams, they form a ceiling element with a panel out of wood chips. serving as a lost formwork for this 10 centimeters of concrete, which serve as an insulation between the different users. And the wood construction is, we try to do without a lot of steel implants, but with pretty simple wood-to-wood joints. To protect the timber construction for weathering, but also due to energy and noise reasons, we developed a double facade, which is good to see here in the in this detail. Here the insulation facade, and here this wrapping with the single glass, and this outer glass is like angled layer, and air can go in there and comes out on the top. The ground place is used for conferences here on the right hand, here the entry, and on the left hand for workshops, and also here the structure, the anatomy, the skeleton determines the character and the atmosphere. The assessment center in NEUWIED is another example for a project developed out of the structure, out of a single module, although the module isn't visible at first. Here in the center, young people with mental and physical disabilities are tested and prepared to be integrated in the job market. On this very tight property, you see the property, it's only this little piece of land. We developed a floor plan which is turned diagonally with respect to the neighboring buildings. The back and forth stepping facade creates an architectural attraction with high identification and the possibility to be recognized in this rather faceless environment between supermarket here, car repair shop here, and these workshop facilities up here, and some housings down here. So we try to intermediate in this very heterogeneous context and to fit well this small scale structure with 2 floors into it. But also to enable a scale which can be perceived even by people with cognitive disabilities. The potential of timber construction is to integrate systems which are added in solid construction. A good understanding and a good acoustic is an essential requirement for any learning rooms. Therefore, the ceilings we developed are similar to BONN, the first project I showed to you. They are static and an acoustic element in one. The basic element, the starting point, are these fine wood chips they are glued together into these panels with very good acoustic qualities, and they serve as a lost formwork for the concrete we put onto it. The concrete provides the necessary noise insulation between different levels. So the separations between the levels, but is also statically effective. Unlike the pavement slabs we put onto the ceiling in BONN, which lay only lazy on the ceiling elements. Here the concrete helps us not only for noise protection, but also for fire protection, and gives us a little some mass, so the climate is not changing too quickly. From this starting point of an idea, we did develop the module of the ceiling, 3 element, 3 meter 20 times 6 meter 40, with a frame out of wood 12 times 52. And in this frame, narrow slats, only 6 centimeter wide, are hung in a 30 centimeter grid. And these slats, they support the panels of the wood chips, serving as lost formwork and to support the concrete. And screws, which you see here, they secure the connection between the concrete and the wooden structure. These elements, they are assembled from its single parts, and they are put together into a whole on 2 levels, and form this quite bizarre figure with the working rooms outside. So Arbeit, Werken, Küche, these are the working rooms, ring-shaped, and they embrace the middle zone, and the middle zone is used in the lower level as cafeteria, and in the upper floor, it's this middle zone is zoned and illuminated by 2 atriums. So this is not only a circulation zone, but can be used for communication between the participants as well as between the teacher. So for individual and teaching and learning. So here you see again the plan with the working rooms at the outside, the fire circulation, and these 2 atriums illuminating this middle zones, and in between you have this rooms, you need toilets and storage rooms. These ceiling elements, 320 times 640, easy to transport, can be prefabricated at the carpenter space. Here the mounting of these, of one of the ceiling elements, you see the frame, you see the slats, and you see these panels. And due to the prefabrication of the ceiling and wall elements, the mounting could be finished in only 3 weeks. 4 ceiling elements are supported in its corner by wooden pillars, 24 times 24 centimeters. And they are put together to an orthogonal structure. Its expression is characterized by this fine rib structure. Here look into the upper floor with this one of the atrium. Here on the right is the second atrium. And you see the structure which gives rhythm and which characterize the interior. For young people with different disabilities, the time in an assessment center is important, since here directions are taken for their future life path. That's why it's necessary to create an inspiring and motivating architectural environment for the time of their internship and applicant training and their diagnostics, inspiring and motivating both to the external experience as well as the quality of stay inside. Instead of empty dark corridors, the teaching rooms are grouped around this middle zone and around this, and open up to this educationally usable areas in between. the corner exposure of each of the classrooms, which are arranged in this ring form around the atriums, they enable multi-sided exposure throughout the day. And we hope, or we intended, that this multi-dimensionality support the young people to open their eyes to the world. And the walls are cladded in the rooms with perforated plywood panels, also for acoustic absorption. The vertical access takes place by light steel stairs outward to return to the outside. On all sides, no front, no back, the desired attractive utility, an inviting house, open house that hides nothing. A second project, which we built again in NEUWIED, is in fact a project which is a project out of two, like conditioner and shampoo in one. So 2 in 1, a medical care center at one side and a workshop for people with disabilities. Since both parts are used by people with restricted mobility, our concept in the competition we won was not to build 2 houses next to each other like they asked for, but to stack the rooms on each other, to use the sloping side. You see the side is sloping about 6 meters. So we thought it's easy to put them, to stack the rooms and to enter the medical center from the right here, and to have the medical center on one floor and to enter the workshop on the left and to put all the workshop on the ground floor. So no user has to change the level, everything. And looking onto the plan, here you see the plan of the upper floor. The medical center is, the entry is here on the right, and there's an interior street. And on this interior street, there are these waiting zones, and then there are these fingers with the single rooms. And the ground floor, the workshop, the lower floor, the entry is here on the left, and that's the cafeteria and the workshops. They open to the courts, and they are also aligned at the interior street, which is open up also to the court. So it's lightened by this court. Despite the unity and the repetitive elements, the buildings react in its scales to the surrounding ear, with the surrounding ear, the areas with the housing area here, and then these more institutional areas here, and somehow they quote the scale of the and the width of the houses here to the left, and so the house is integrated in the surrounding. The structure of the ceiling element is 3.60 meters times 10.30, and it's built. The ceiling elements is built out of these beams. They are put together and cladded on top and on the bottom, statically effective, and we put mineral wool into the ceiling. So again, this is not only a ceiling element, it's also not only load bearing, but it's also an acoustic element at the same time. And these elements, they are point supported with these pillars at the edge, and 60 centimeter pieces in the middle, which is used for storage space. And with some stiffening plywood walls in between, carrying the ceiling elements 2-story high, allowing different and changing uses. So it's very adaptable, with a sloping roof for it's fitting in the surrounding, offset. Here you see offset in the middle, so to illuminate the room in its depth, or here you see the rooms which open to the court, or to illuminate where there's a corridor, so the corridors light instead of dark. The rooms open into the, or to the space in between the 3-sided courts. The repetitive typology enables subtle setting and gives scale and orientation also for the users and visitors with cognitive disabilities. By working on a project for multiple disabled children in the Rheingau area west of Frankfurt, we looked for a low-cost construction with a very simple structure, with short spans, 3 houses, 1, 2, 3, and they are arranged around this common courtyard. And 9 children live in each of the T-shaped houses with the rooms which are oriented outside to east, south, and west. So north is here on the left, and looking outside into the park, and with a living and eating area here, with the kitchen and nursery room attached, and with the entry always in the corner of this T-shaped plan. In our search to avoid any hospital-like atmosphere, as it is common in these institutions, we developed a pavilion-like structure with the interior, which opens into the landscape, allowing the outside to become part of the inside. This simple plan is translated also in a very simple structure with the wooden frame walls and the beam ceiling with only short spans. But here the structure is hidden inside; it's not visible. It is only serving, not a formative element. Everything is concentrated to strengthen the connection of inside and outside. The cantilevering roof expands. Here you see it on the left and right. Expands the common living dining area and creates an interesting room in between, a threshold in between public and private, belonging to the home and to the court at the same time, which is widely used today. So, and next, are there any limitations in timber architecture? When building in wood, besides all the building regulations, besides all the fears and regulations everybody has to wood in architecture. Since wood is the historical material of the city, we have to recognize that wood is not the building material only for rural areas, but can be used in every context, as we do for a residential project in the middle of Regensburg. This is the historic center of Regensburg, and this is that what we are planning to build there. Competition we won last year. Clearly an answer from our time, but woven into the historic context, taking in the regularities of the surroundings, such as heights, proportions, and colors. The idea is to live around a central courtyard, a court like in Alfred Hitchcock's famous movie, a synonym for community as a space for identification and communication, and meeting point for residents and for community activities. In this sense, all of the apartments are lined around this inner garden and open up to this inner garden. So I don't see any limitation in where to build, but I also see no limitation in what to build in the case of typologies. Of course, everything may be built out of wood. Here a study for a concert hall in Tübingen next to a central bus station, which we developed at my institute at the university. Very high acoustic demands for the noise from outside, but also for acoustic inside. And what we developed is a double plywood wall construction built up with sand. Here you see the sections. So this is the plywood wall, and in between we put some sand, and we tested it and got very good results. At the same time, the construction methods, especially hybrid constructions with other natural building materials, are not yet exhausted. Anne Beim pointed out her research yesterday evening. We are working on a wood clay composite ceiling elements, which you can see here. So the wood construction with the clay component, and this clay component is also used statically. So we are searching on how to combine these. And we try to convey the magic and beauty of wood architecture to students early in the third and fourth semester. You see here a studio project of last semester, fourth semester, was the entry building of the zoo here in Darmstadt. And I would be happy if the 2 weeks we are doing and joining this workshop contribute also to this. So thanks a lot for your patience.